Well, good evening, folks. This is Andrew Cummings here, and once again, very happy to be with you for this Missionary Monday Live. Sorry this is a little bit late. I planned to do it a little earlier today. Then we had an unexpected visit. A pastor friend of mine came over with his family, so we were happy to have them with us. But the result is that Missionary Monday Live is a little later. However, it's not as late. It's about 11 o'clock here. In Brazil time, which means for most of you at Eastern Standard Time now that daylight savings time has hit. You guys, it's only about 9, so not quite as late as it is here. So, welcome. I'm glad to have you all watching, and we're going to give a quick recap some of the interesting things that have happened, and this has been the week for just tragic news stories, starting with one here, and then, of course, with what happened just yesterday in the United States. What happened here, I'm going to give you a quick rundown. Last Wednesday, we were at prayer meeting and at our church, and one of the ladies gave a prayer request for a little girl who had gone missing, 10-year-old girl. So we, of course, prayed for that and kept praying for that. And then the news kept coming over the WhatsApp program. I talked about that and how prevalent that is here in Brazil last week. And the news just kept coming about that. And at one point they said, oh, she's been found. She's with her father. And then again, the next day, no, that's a cruel hoax. She hasn't been found. We're still looking. Keep praying. So we kept praying, but then on Friday, I believe it was Friday, they found the little girl's body buried in the backyard with signs of sexual abuse. And from the very beginning, the estranged boyfriend of the father, let me try it again. Today that could happen. The estranged boyfriend of the mother was a suspect based on some activities he had engaged in before and some suspicious activity. And then, so once the investigation kicked into high gear and it was a murder investigation, all of a sudden he disappeared. And immediately in the city, all over the city, signs went up, all over on Facebook, on social media, on WhatsApp, signs went up everywhere. Help us find this man, this picture was up, you couldn't miss it. On Saturday, he was trying to get out of the city, and he almost made it. He almost made it to the bridge that leads off of the island, but there happened to be two off-duty police officers. They're actually on vacation, but they happened to be riding in that exact van, and as they're riding, they recognized the guy, and so they pulled out their weapons and yanked the guy off the bus. And as God would have it, they were right on they were right next to a police checkpoint. And I guess they kind of waited until the van got to that police checkpoint. Then they yanked the guy off the van, and the other policemen were there and surrounded them. And then they were immediately surrounded by a huge crowd. And if you scroll down through my Facebook feed, you'll be able to see this video. It's just extremely impressive, the huge crowd that gathered in a short period of time. Once the word had spread, they've caught this guy. There's a huge crowd, and I have a video on there that shows him waiting, being held by two police officers, and then the camera pans, and he's being led to the car, and the police kind of form a corridor for him to go through as he's led to the squad car. And on either side, there's just multitudes of people screaming at him. I think some are actually trying to get him with a taser, and others are trying to throw things at him or hit him and yelling swear words. And then there's even a dog that gets in the action, is barking at his heels as he goes through. The guy was absolutely terrified, as he should be. He has, by the way, since then confessed it was him, and the evidence that I've seen and that has been presented, it pretty much leaves little doubt as to that he was the one that did it. there is some there is a little discrepancy. Not that he was involved, but if whether or not there was someone else that was involved, or at least covering up for him. That remains to be seen. But his future is not great. He will, if he makes it to trial, he will, I guarantee you, he will be found guilty. If by some technicality he gets off, he will not make it off the island. He will be lynched. There's just no it. And if he is declared guilty and sent to jail, the prisoners in the jail will lynch him. I mean, this guy's days are measured in days. His life is being measured now in days and weeks. In fact, one of the biggest criminal factions here, one of the biggest gangs, that's called the B40, Bonde dos 40. They've been sending out voice recordings all over social media, saying basically this guy's a dead man walking. The phrase they use is he's dead and doesn't know it. They said, we're going to kill him, we're going to give videotape, we're going to post this videotape all over, because what he did to this girl, you don't do to a girl. And it's interesting, that's one of the biggest, that's people from one of the biggest criminal factions in town that are morally outraged at what this guy did. It's interesting that in our justice system, in our society here in Brazil, the criminal faction has more of a sense of justice on some occasions than the actual justice system does. Because according to the justice system, if everything were to go normally, the most this guy could, if I understand the system correctly, the most this guy could spend in jail is 30 years. And he's about 30 years old right now. So that means that at the most, within 60 years, as a 60-year-old man, he'd be walking free. So the whole city was just in an uproar about this thing. I took my son Saturday to his computer course, and I was sitting in a little restaurant watching the TV, and that showed the funeral procession, and they had her casket, the little girl's casket, on a big fire truck, and a huge procession was following it. And I looked at the road, and I'm here, hey, I know that road, and it was the road. It's the road, the main road that goes right by our house. That I think I put on Facebook. That's less than a mile away. It's actually a little more than that. But the cemetery is about 2 miles away from my house. I go by every time I leave the house where she was buried. So, it's this community. I went on Friday, just when they found the girl's body. I went to get some chicken at a barbecue chicken place that they have here, and it's where I go every week. And the guy was the same guy that was serving me the chicken, and that's all they were talking about. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, this kind of makes, because Brazil does not have the death penalty, but I said, this kind of makes the death penalty seem more of an option, don't you think? And he looked at me and he said, he agreed with me. He said, and if you're a father, you know exactly what I'm feeling, the man said. And of course I know exactly what he's feeling. So anyway, that is huge. And it's just this is something that of course blew up, and because it's such a horrible crime involving a child, a little child, the epitome of innocence. And somewhere, well, if you scroll down through my Facebook page, I've got articles there posted that will show you her picture, just the most beautiful little girl. And that someone could do this to her shows the level of the depravity of the human heart. I was talking to someone the other day about what are called the 5 points of Calvinism, and one of them is the total depravity. And of all of what are called the points of Calvinism, the total depravity of man is the most readily evident in the society around us. The fact that this could be done by one human being to another human being. It's just unbelievable. So then, of course, I got to church, and the conversation was all about this, because like I said, this is our community that this is happening in. And church was really interesting. I got this, just a side note, I got this idea from my brother Daniel, who did it a couple Sundays ago at Fellowship Baptist Church in Lakeland, Florida. I took a message from Charles Spurgeon where he talks about Luther, and I was actually going to do this last Sunday for Reformation Sunday, but then if you remember, if you watched last Sunday, I got pink eye, so that didn't quite happen. So I just moved it to this Sunday, and someone had done me the favor of translating this message already into Portuguese. I went through and modified it a little bit, cut it down a little bit because it's very long. And then I read this to the people at the church. It was really well received. In fact, one lady from the church came and said, "Oh, Pastor, I needed that so much." It was he takes the theme, "The just shall live by faith," and just expounds this theme, and at the end applies it to Martin Luther's life and talks about how this was key for the conversion and life of Martin Luther. So that was Sunday, and we were kind of on a high from that. It was a really great service, and we came back. And I opened up my cell phone once I got back to the house, and there was the news. I hadn't seen it earlier of what happened in Texas. And I'm looking and I'm reading this in horror. We've just gone through the horror of this event, this murder happening just right down the road from us. And I'm opening up and seeing with horror what's happening in my own country. And with the shock of seeing that and seeing Christians targeted in that way, and then being on Twitter, which is only recommended in small doses, but being on Twitter and watching the responses to this, and how people can actually use this occasion when Christians have been gunned down in a worship service to somehow mock Christians. And I remember, it wasn't that long ago, it was last year, I was in the United States, and when the gunman, the Muslim gunman, walked into a gay nightclub in Orlando and started shooting. And I was horrified by that. I was moved to what's the word I want to use? Moved to compassion by that, not because of the lifestyle of the victims, not because of the religion of the shooter, but because these were fellow human beings created in the image of God, and they have been gunned down in a completely horrific way. And I was so moved by that I found a legitimate GoFundMe page, and I went and I actually made a small contribution. And at that time, I wasn't exactly rolling in the cash, but I said, these are people, and I'm going to make a small donation because of that. And what is blowing me away is that, I see it on the part of other Christians, but on the part of on a national scale, I'm not seeing the same outrage. I'm seeing outrage about guns. I'm seeing every time the whole political thing about guns, and thank heavens for the two guys who were there who had guns, had legal guns, who could take out the guy who had an illegal gun. That's not what I want to get into here. What's shocking me about this, I'm sitting here in Brazil and I'm watching, and once again, my only source of information is social media, and we don't even have a TV here at the house at the moment, so I'm not even getting news. Not even CNN. It's just Twitter and some news accounts I follow on Twitter. But what's shocking me is how little actual sympathy I am seeing from people who are not believers. From believers, of course, Christians are shocked and outraged and horrified, and that could be any one of our churches on any given Sunday. But society at large is ambivalent to the idea that these guys were Christians and they were shot down in their service. The most people can seem to muster is, we've got to do something about the guns. Guys, that's a serious problem. I don't know how much more I can emphasize this, that our society has lost a common empathy. And we don't have time to get into that and go through it, but there's a hardening of society and a lack and a general diminishing of civility in society. And I'm sure there's lots of factors I don't want to go into. I just want to point out that that's the case. And this is something I see Many times people ask me, well, Andrew, you live outside the country, and so you have a different perspective. What do you see from... Well, that's what I see. Just a lack, just a hardness and a lack of general civility. And I know most of the people who are watching this are believers, many in our supporting churches. And ultimately, there's a lot of causes and effects and so on, but ultimately, here's what I think is happening. The influence of the gospel in the United States of America is waning. The influence of the gospel is diminishing. A verse came to mind, talking about both here in Brazil, the situation here in Brazil in our neighborhood, the horrific murder that happened, and then, of course, what happened in Texas. This verse came to mind, Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. Now, I've heard a couple interpretations of this question. There's no vision. Some people translate that as leadership. Others, the vision, and I tend to hold to this idea. The question of a vision is actually divine revelation, where there is no divine revelation. And what is needed more than anything, both here in Brazil and in the United States, is fearless proclamation of the gospel. The next line is not so commonly known in that verse says, "But he that keepeth the law, happy is he." Well, keep the law, we understand. We're saved by grace, not by law. The righteous shall live by faith. And so we understand that the law has been kept for us. And now we follow what is the law of love, and we obey the law of Christ out of love for Christ. And so, we follow the law not out of obligation, not out of a sense of dread, but out of love for Christ. We understand this, but the truth remains: he that keepeth the law, happy is he. And there is a general lawlessness and a general lack of civility which is pervading both of our cultures, both the Brazilian culture and the American culture. In the Brazilian culture, there are times, like the video I mentioned earlier, when segments of our society are on the verge of anarchy. And I see that from a distance. I see the same trends happening in the United States. And what has to happen, in my opinion, is that Christians in both countries, we need to get rid of the fluff. We need to get right back down to brass tacks and proclaim the gospel at every occasion that we have, every opportunity that we have, fearlessly. I believe we've become much too timid. I believe I can't really talk about that here in the public school. I'm not really allowed to do this at my job. I could lose my job. I believe we've become much too timid. And the result is that the gospel is not having the effect in the hearts and minds of individuals, and because it's not having an effect in the hearts and minds of individuals, it's not having an effect in society. And society will only be preserved to the extent that the gospel is having some effect. I thank God for the faithfulness of the church there in Texas, and I put a link. A fellow missionary, he's a missionary in Russia with a different mission agency, but I follow him, and he has a lot of good stuff. His name's Caleb Suko. I think I pronounced that last name right, Caleb Suko. He's a missionary in Russia, and Ukraine, I believe. And he posted a little analysis, which I thought was very good. It's on my Facebook page. You can go and see it. You scroll down and see it, and you can see the he talks about the last message that the pastor spoke the Sunday previous to the attack of that church. And it's really good, and Caleb's analysis is really good also. So be sure to watch that. That's and read what Caleb wrote. It's really, really good, and I'm thankful for the testimony of that church. But folks, we really, really, really need to pray for our society. And as you're praying for yours, remember that a huge proportion of the Christian workers of the world live in American society. much less of a proportion of the Christian workers of the world live in our society here in Brazil. So as you're praying for American society, pray for our society here in Brazil. And pray for our believers. Pray that the gospel will be fearlessly preached from the pulpits and proclaimed in the everyday lives of our people. This is essential. This is what's lacking and what needs to happen more and more. That's basically what's on my mind today. I want to throw a link or two at you here. The first link, let's see if I can find the video here. The first link I just want to put up. Every week I put up a link to our book, Missionary Max and the Jungle Princess. And now it's not letting me find the video. If I don't, I'll find it afterwards and I'll put it there. Couple links here. While I'm looking for that, let me just share with you. I have started putting these videos on a dedicated channel in YouTube. Okay, so here we go. So here, the Amazon link to our books. If you're into good fiction, exciting missionary Christian fiction, then this is the book for you, and you can read that at your leisure. It's a paper book. Also, you can get it as a Kindle book as well. And then, like I said, I've put up. For some reason, we're not wanting to open YouTube right now. But I put all these things on a dedicated YouTube channel, and when this opens up, if this opens up, I will put that link down there for you. And also, I want to put up just a link. We've got a couple offerings, and in the next few days, you're going to see some more work on our website, some more pictures of work being done at our church. Right now, we're redoing the electric wiring on the parsonage of the church, and then we're going to be looking at some. Then we're going to be, and for some reason, nothing is opening up in this browser right now. Ugh, such a pain. Anyway, so you're going to be seeing some work going on at the camp as well, because we got a fairly decent offering, good size, very generous offering actually, to be able to get some work done at the camp. And while I'm trying to open up these pages and my internet connection is not working, if it doesn't work, it's not going to work now, but I'll go on later and put those links there. You can see some of the projects at the camp that we still have to do. And if you're interested in helping us out with some of those projects to get done, we would be very grateful for that. So anyway, that's Missionary Monday Live for the moment, just sharing these two situations and observations. Pray for us here. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your support. We're very excited about what's going on here. God has opened up some doors. We're going through them. And hopefully some very interesting things to share in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for a prayer letter. I wasn't able to get it out last week. Hopefully this week it will go out. You'll be able to see, I'll be able to share in writing some of the things that are going on. If you don't get our prayer letter, you can shoot me your email address, and I will be happy to put you on our list to get our supposed to be monthly prayer letter. Doesn't always happen that way, but it's supposed to be monthly. All right. Hey, thanks for joining me. Maybe next Monday it won't be so late. I don't know. Can't guarantee it. If you didn't get to watch the whole thing, shortly it will be up on Facebook, and I'll also have it up on our own dedicated YouTube channel so you can see that. Once again, thanks for watching. God bless. Until next week.